When Aunt tried to steal my late father's entire estate, I hired a lawyer and got every single cent. The judge finishes reading the ruling, and for a second, the words don't sound real, just a low hum under the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Then one sentence slices through clearly. The court upholds the validity of the will dated February 14th and orders that the entirety of the estate be granted to the sole beneficiary, the decedent's child, Emily Rhodes. My legs go weirdly light and heavy at the same time. I grip the edge of the wooden table so hard my knuckles whiten. On the other side of the courtroom, my aunt's mouth is open just enough to show the lipstick on her front teeth, her eyes darting between me, the judge, and her own lawyer like someone's told her the world is actually flat. My lawyer leans over and whispers, "We won," as if the last 8 months of my life haven't been proof that nothing is guaranteed. Aunt Linda moves first. She jumps up, heels clacking against the linoleum. "This is ridiculous," she snaps, voice echoing in the quiet room. She manipulated him. He was sick. He didn't know what he was signing. Her lawyer tugs at her sleeve, face pale. The judge's gaze cuts over his glasses. "Ms. Hargrove, you are out of order," he says. "Sit down, or you will be removed." My heart is pounding loud enough that I can feel it in my ears, but under it all there's this strange, solid calm. The same calm I felt the night I found the envelope in Dad's desk drawer and realized my aunt hadn't just been helping with paperwork. She'd been trying to erase me. I look at her now at the fury and disbelief and the way she still looks at me like I'm a child, and I think, "Dad, I did what you asked. I protected what you left me." It was a Tuesday morning in March when the hospital called to say my father was gone. Not passed peacefully or slipped away or any of the soft phrases people like to use, just gone. One minute he was there in a bed that smelled like bleach and plastic and faint stale coffee, and the next minute he wasn't. He was 63, which everyone kept telling me was young these days, as if that helped. I was 27, an only child, and my mother had died when I was 14, so it had always been just me and Dad in our little brick house after that. In the movie version of this story, our grief would have pulled the family together. In real life, my Aunt Linda rolled into the hospital 3 hours after he died, perfume cloud preceding her, and immediately started talking about logistics. "We'll need to get his accounts sorted," she said, dropping her oversized handbag on the chair in the visitor's lounge. "And the house, of course. And the car. You can't be expected to deal with all that, Em. Not in your state." In my state. I remember looking down at myself, at the hoodie with the hospital logo I'd thrown on over yesterday's t-shirt, at the red indent on my wrist from the hospital bracelet he'd made me wear as a joke, so you don't get lost, kiddo. I was mostly numb, like my brain had wrapped itself in cotton. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "I can handle things." She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Linda is my father's younger sister by 7 years, and she's always been the sort of person who makes everything about her without technically doing anything you can quote. "Of course you can," she said. "You're a strong girl. Just let me help. Your dad and I talked about this. He wanted me to handle the boring stuff so you could focus on, grieving." I didn't remember Dad saying anything like that, but my head was buzzing and the word grieving made my throat close. So I didn't argue when she took Dad's wallet for safekeeping, or when she said she'd call the bank since she already knew who to talk to. I didn't even argue when she asked for the key to his home office, the one he usually kept on his keyring. "It's just papers, Em," she said when I hesitated. "Someone's got to sort through the mortgage documents and the insurance and all of that. You don't want bills piling up. Trust me, it's better if I take it on. Trust me." The thing is, when you just watch your father die, it's weirdly easy to hand over a ring of keys to someone who sounds like they know what they're doing. The first time I got twisted was at the funeral home. We were sitting in a small office that smelled overwhelmingly like artificial lilies, going through options we couldn't really afford. The director slid the paperwork across the desk. "We'll just need the next of kin to sign here," he said. "That would be you, Miss Rhodes." I reached for the pen, but Aunt Linda's hand landed on the page first. "I'm his sister," she said. "I've been managing his affairs." The director blinked. "Legally, his child is the next of kin," he said, nodding toward me. "Unless there's a spouse." Linda laughed lightly, as if it were all a silly misunderstanding. Of course," she said, retracting her hand. I'm just emotionally supporting. Raichi. She turned to me with a look that said, "Don't you dare embarrass me." I signed. My hand shook so badly the first letter of my surname looked like it had been written by someone else. After the funeral, everything blurred. People came and went, dropping off casseroles and cheap supermarket flowers that wilted in their plastic sleeves. I spent nights on the couch, half watching the TV, waiting for the sound of Dad's key in the front door, even though I knew it wasn't coming. Linda, on the other hand, was a whirlwind. "I've been down to the bank," she announced one morning while I was making instant coffee in a kitchen that still smelled like Dad's aftershave. "We'll need to get his accounts frozen and his assets assessed. It's lucky I had power of attorney." I frowned. Power of attorney was just for his medical stuff, I said. "Right?" She waved a hand. "It's all the same thing, sweetheart. Don't get bogged down in legal jargon. The important thing is someone reliable is handling it." The way she said reliable made something prickle under my skin. "What about his will?" I asked. "He told me he updated it last year." Her smile tightened slightly. "I spoke to his solicitor," she said. "There's no will on file. You know what your father was like with admin. He probably meant to update it and never got around to it." That didn't sound like Dad. He was forgetful about taking out the trash or returning library books, but when it came to serious things, he was meticulous. He kept folders for everything: utilities, insurance, medical, all lined up in his office cabinet with little labels. And the will we'd talked about it. About 8 months earlier, after one of his cardiology appointments, we'd sat at the diner he liked, plates of greasy eggs between us. He'd been quieter than usual, stirring his coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. "I updated my will," he'd said out of nowhere. I remember freezing with my fork halfway to my mouth. "That's cheerful," I'd said, because my default response to anything scary is sarcasm. He chuckled. "Life insurance wills, it's all the same file, kiddo," he said. "Gotta make sure everything's in order. You know how your Aunt Linda gets." "How she gets about what?" "About money," he said. "About what's fair." He made air quotes. "I wanted it all clear, so there's no fighting when well, I'm not around." "You're not going anywhere," I'd said automatically. "Everyone's going somewhere eventually," he'd replied. I don't want you to be bullied into giving up what's yours." So I made it simple, straightforward. "You're my kid. It goes to you. End of story." He'd reach across the table and squeeze my hand. "If anyone says otherwise, you tell them to read the paper." The memory sat heavy in my chest now. In the kitchen, with Linda stirring sugar in her tea as if she hadn't just erased that conversation with a wave. "What about the copy at home?" I asked. "He always keeps everything in that metal cabinet." Linda's eyes flicked toward the hall. "I've already looked," she said too quickly. "It's not there. Honestly, you probably never signed the thing. Clients say all sorts of things to solicitors. Don't upset yourself." The next day, when she went out to run more errands, I went into Dad's office. She'd changed the lock on the door so things don't get lost, but she forgot I'd grown up here. There's a loose bit of trim under the hallway radiator where Dad used to hide Christmas presents. He'd also hidden a spare key there the day I started high school, holding it up like some sacred relic. "In case of emergency, or if I lock myself out like an idiot," he'd said. The office looked disturbed. That's the only word I have for it. Dad was messy, but it was always a gentle kind of mess. Sticky notes on the monitor, mugs on the coaster, piles of books leaning against the wall. Now, the drawers were slightly open, file folders stacked on the floor, the smell of his aftershave overlaid with something chemical, like furniture polish. I went straight to the metal cabinet. The file labeled Personal Legal was there, but lighter than it should have been. Inside, birth certificates, insurance policies, the oval I remembered from years ago. In that one, he'd left half of everything to Mom and then split it between me and Linda if they both died. It was dated 12 years ago, before Mom's cancer, before Dad's heart issues, before a lot of things. No updated will. I stood there for a long time, file open in my hands, feeling like my heart was trying to climb up my throat. There are two kinds of people in situations like that. The ones who accept what they're told, and the ones whose brains start quietly assembling puzzle pieces whether they want them to or not. Unfortunately for my aunt, I'm the second kind. Piece 1. Dad had told me, clearly, that he'd updated the will and left everything to me. Piece 2. Aunt Linda was suddenly very keen on controlling every bit of paperwork and conversation with banks and solicitors, while at the same time insisting there was no will. Piece 3. The file cabinet had definitely been rummaged through. Piece 4. Linda had a history of managing my grandmother's finances in a way that suspiciously benefited herself, something the family whispered about but never confronted her on. By the time she got back from her errands, my brain was crackling. "How was the bank?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She smiled brightly. "All sorted," she said. "They'll release the funds once probate goes through." "Probate for what?" I asked. "For the estate," she said, as if I were dense. "Since there's no will, it's intestate. Next of kin will be appointed. It gets complicated, but don't worry, I've already spoken to a solicitor. I'm applying to be administrator. You're in no state to deal with this." There it was again. You're in no state. Like grief equals legal incompetence. "Why you?" I asked. She blinked. "Excuse me? Why you instead of me?" I said. "I'm his daughter." "You're also a child," she snapped before softening her tone. "Legally an adult, sure, but emotionally, you can barely function right now. I'm older. I have experience. It just makes sense. And of course I'll make sure you're taken care of." The way someone says taken care of can either sound comforting or threatening. Her version was the second. That night, when I couldn't sleep, I Googled intestate next of kin child versus sibling until my eyes burned. What I learned: if there's no will, generally the estate goes to the children, not the siblings, unless there's something very specific going on. But whoever is appointed administrator controls the process, and if that person is not honest, they can make things very messy and expensive. I lay there staring at the ceiling, imagining Aunt Linda taking care of things, and felt that small, sharp thing inside me harden. The next day, I called Dad's solicitor myself. His name was on several letters in the file cabinet, a neat logo at the top. "Rhodes and Partners. This is Claire," the receptionist said. "Hi," I said. "My name is Emily Rhodes. My father was John Rhodes. He passed away last week. I was wondering if there's a will on file." There was a pause. Typing. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Ms. Rhodes," she said. "One moment, I'll just check." My heart thudded. I could hear my own breathing, the muffled sound of traffic outside. "Yes," she said finally. "We have a will for Mr. Rhodes dated February 14th last year. It names you as the sole beneficiary and executor." For a second I thought I might actually throw up. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said. "He came in with his sister, I believe. They both signed as witnesses. You'll need to make an appointment to come in and discuss probate, but the will is valid on its face." "With his sister?" I repeated. "Yes," she said. "A Ms. Hargrove. Is that correct?" I thanked her, wrote down the appointment date with shaking hands, and hung up. Linda hadn't just known about the will. She'd been there when he signed it. By the time she came over that afternoon, I'd moved from shock to something colder. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked, dropping a hand onto my shoulder. I stepped back. "I spoke to Dad's solicitor," I said. Her hand froze in midair. "Oh, they have a will," I said. "Dated last year. It names me as sole beneficiary and executor." For a fraction of a second, something ugly flickered across her face. Then she laughed. "Oh, that," she said. "That's not valid, Em." He was confused. His heart medication really messed him up. We talked to Mr. Harrington afterwards and agreed it should be destroyed. It wasn't reflective of his true wishes. "Destroyed," I repeated. "Well, yes," she said. "Your father decided it was a mistake." She faltered when she saw my expression. "Oh, don't look at me like that. He told me he'd redo it, and then, you know your father, he never did. The old will is the one that counts. It's more balanced." "Balanced? As in, gave her half." "Mr. Harrington still has it," I said. "The new one. He says it's valid." Her eyes narrowed. "You went over my head," she said. It hit me then in a very clear, ugly way. She thought this was hers. She thought of Dad's house, his savings, his car, Maybe even his watch and his battered record player as things she'd already mentally moved into her own life. And I was the ungrateful child messing up her plan. "I'm his daughter," I said quietly. "There is no over your head." She went red. "Your father didn't mean to cut me out," she said. "He was ill. He was scared. I've always been there for him. For both of you. Do you have any idea how much time I spent helping him after your mother died? How much money I lent him? You also borrowed Grandma's jewelry and never gave it back," I said. "And somehow all of Grandma's savings ended up paying off your credit card. We all remember that." Her mouth tightened. "If you're going to be like this," she said, "I don't see why I should bother helping you. You think you can handle all this legal stuff, go ahead. But don't come crying to me when the court ties everything up and you're stuck paying fees you can't afford." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard one of Dad's framed photos rattled on the wall. I sat down at the kitchen table, looked at the cup of tea she'd left half drunk, and burst into tears. Not the pretty movie kind, either, the ugly, snotty, gasping kind that leaves you with a headache. When I finally calmed down, I called the number printed at the bottom of a flyer Dad had stuck to the fridge months before: free initial consultation, estate and probate law. He'd circled it with a note: "In case I get hit by a bus, kiddo." It had been a joke then. The woman who picked up, Ms. Gomez, sounded brisk but kind. I told her everything in a stumbling rush. Dad's illness, his death, Aunt Linda's help, the missing will, the call to the solicitor. "Okay," she said when I finished. "First things first, I'm sorry about your dad. Second, take a breath. Third, do not sign anything your aunt puts in front of you, and do not let her apply for administration unchallenged. You understand?" I did. In that moment, I really did. Over the next few weeks, my life became a crash course in probate law. Ms. Gomez helped me file an application to prove the new will. We obtained a certified copy from Mr. Harrington's office. She explained, slowly and with diagrams when necessary, the difference between executor and administrator, between beneficiary rights and helpful relative overreach. Meanwhile, Linda filed her own application, claiming there was no known valid will and that as the deceased's closest competent relative, she should administer the estate. In her paperwork, she described me as emotionally vulnerable and unfamiliar with financial matters. She didn't mention that she'd been present when Dad signed the new will, or that she'd told me it had been destroyed. When Ms. Gomez showed me the copy of Linda's application, my hands trembled. "She's lying," I said. "She's attempting to secure control," Ms. Gomez corrected. "Lying will be for the judge to decide. Fortunately, your father's solicitor is prepared to testify that your aunt accompanied him willingly, that he appeared of sound mind, and that both of them signed as witnesses. That helps us. A lot." I oscillated between determination and guilt. "She's still family," I said more than once. "Am I a terrible person for dragging this into court?" Ms. Gomez looked at me over her glasses. "Did you start this?" "No," I said. "She did." "Did you forge any documents?" "Obviously not." "Did you bully a sick old man into changing his will?" "No," I said, feeling slightly sick. "Then you're not the bad actor here," she said. "You are enforcing a valid legal document that reflects your father's wishes. Families sometimes need courts when one member decides the rules don't apply to them." Dad's words came back to me again. "If anyone says otherwise, you tell them to read the paper." The paper, in this case, was 20 pages long, full of legal jargon, signatures, and small, clipped phrases like "revokes all prior wills and codicils." But at its heart, it was simple. John Rhodes, leave everything I own to my daughter, Emily Rhodes. The day of the hearing, my stomach was a knot of acid. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and old books. People shuffled in and out of rooms with names on plaques. My case was one of many on the docket, just another file in a stack. Linda arrived in a Navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, flanked by a man with a briefcase and an expression like he'd rather be anywhere else. She gave me a tight smile that didn't match the poison in her eyes. "You could have avoided all this," she murmured as we waited in the corridor. "We could have sorted things out like adults. Instead, you've chosen to humiliate the family." "By sorted out, you mean ignored Dad's will," I said. My voice shook, but I held her gaze. She sniffed. He didn't know what he was doing, she said. He was on medication. He was lonely. You were always off living your own life. He was scared you'd sell the house, squander everything. He told me he regretted signing it. If that's true, I said, he could have changed it again. He didn't. You don't get to nullify his choices because they don't benefit you. Her lips pressed together into a thin line. You sound just like him when you're being stubborn, she said. Thank you, I replied. In the courtroom, everything felt both incredibly slow and dizzyingly fast. The judge was an older man with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He flipped through the file, occasionally peering over at us. Ms. Gomez laid out our case calmly. She presented the will, the medical reports from around the time Dad signed it, the affidavit from Mr. Harrington attesting to his sound mind, the fact that no subsequent will existed. Linda's lawyer argued that Dad had been unduly influenced by me and that he'd expressed doubts later. He had no documentation to back this up, only Linda's statement and a few vague references to conversations. At one point, Linda herself took the stand. Watching her swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth nearly made me snort. He was confused, she said, voice wobbling just enough. He didn't understand what he was doing. He thought he was just signing some hospital paperwork. Afterwards, he told me he didn't mean to cut me out, that he wanted things to be fair. He asked me to fix it. Ms. Gomez's cross-examination was brutal in a quiet way. Ms. Hargrove, she said, if your brother was so confused, why did you sign as a witness to this allegedly invalid will? Linda blinked. I trusted the solicitor, she said. So you believe it was valid at the time? Yes, but later. And when you discovered this later change of heart, did you accompany your brother back to Mr. Harrington's office to execute a new will? No, he was ill. Did you, at any point, instruct Mr. Harrington to destroy the will? We discussed it. He has no record of that, Ms. Gomez said. And yet, when my client asked you about the existence of a will, you told her there was none. Is that correct? I didn't want to upset her, Linda said. She was grieving. It was complicated. No further questions, Ms. Gomez said. Sitting there, listening to my aunt twist herself into knots, I felt strangely detached, as if I were watching a TV drama with the volume turned slightly down. When it was over, the judge asked a few questions of his own. He looked particularly unimpressed by the fact that Linda had applied to administer the estate while already knowing there was a later will naming me both executor and sole beneficiary. Whatever concerns you have about your brother's decisions, he said, the correct course of action would have been to bring those concerns to the court transparently, not to proceed as if no will existed at all. We were called back in after a short recess for the ruling. My hands left damp prints on the table. The judge spoke for several minutes about legal tests for capacity, the weight of contemporaneous evidence, and the importance of respecting the deceased's intentions when clearly expressed. My brain clung only to the key phrases: valid and enforceable, no sufficient evidence of undue influence, executor to proceed as per the will. When he finally said, the entirety of the estate be granted to the sole beneficiary, the decedent's child, Emily Rhodes, it felt like someone had taken a boulder off my chest. Linda's outburst came then, full of accusations and half-formed threats. The judge shut her down. Her lawyer whispered something about appeals, but sounded half-hearted even to my ears. Outside the courtroom, in the echoing hallway, she rounded on me. You've ruined this family, she hissed. Your father would be ashamed. It hurt, because for nearly my whole life I'd been trained to flinch when adults told me I'd disappointed them. But then I thought of Dad at that diner table, his hand warm over mine, telling me he trusted me to hold the line. I did exactly what he asked me to do, I said. You were the one who tried to erase his wishes because they didn't fit your definition of fair. That's on you, not me. Her face twisted. Enjoy your blood money, she said, and stalked off down the corridor, heels clicking like punctuation marks. It's been almost a year since that day. I moved back into the house, not because it's some symbol of victory, but because it's home. I replaced the sagging couch and the threadbare rug. I kept Dad's record player. I turned his office into a study, but left one wall exactly the way it was, pinned with his old postcards and notes. The estate wasn't enormous. This isn't some fairy tale where I walked away with millions. It was enough, though. Enough that I could pay off my student loans, fix the leaking roof, breathe without feeling like every unexpected bill would crush me. Enough that I could grieve without the constant background hum of financial panic. Sometimes when I'm making coffee in the kitchen and the late afternoon light hits the counter just so, I can almost see Dad leaning against the doorway, mug in hand, raising an eyebrow. "Did you really hire a lawyer and drag your aunt to court, kiddo?" I imagine him saying, "Yeah." I tell him in my head, "I did. And did you get what I left you?" Every single cent. The money isn't the point, not really. The point is that he trusted me, and I trusted him, and together we managed to outmaneuver someone who thought she could rewrite reality because she wanted a bigger slice. People on the outside sometimes say, "Wow, I could never take family to court," like it's some moral high ground. What they don't understand is that sometimes family leaves you no choice. Sometimes the only way to honor the person you lost is to stand up to the ones they left behind. I don't talk to Aunt Linda anymore. She sent one long, rambling email about 6 months after the ruling, half apology, half justification. "I just panicked," she wrote. "You have your whole life ahead of you." I'm alone. I thought he'd want me to be comfortable too. I drafted about 10 responses in my head and deleted all of them. In the end, I wrote, "Dad made provisions for you in other ways. You know that. You chose to go against his will, literally and figuratively. I hope you find a way to live with that. I'm done relitigating it." She hasn't written since. Some nights, lying in my old new bedroom, listening to the familiar creaks of the house settling, I think about that moment in court when the judge read out my name. It didn't feel like winning the lottery. It felt like something quieter and deeper, like the universe just this once acknowledging, "Yes, you're not crazy. What happened to you is wrong. You were right to fight." If there's one thing I've learned through this mess, it's that wills and estates aren't just about money or houses or who gets the ceramic owl collection. They're about whose voices get heard when someone can no longer speak. My aunt tried to steal my late father's entire estate, but what she was really trying to steal was his final say. So I hired a lawyer. I sat through meetings and hearings and sleepless nights and endless forms. I felt guilty and angry and scared and stubborn, often all at once. And at the end of it, I walked out of that courtroom with more than just every single cent he left me. I walked out with the knowledge that when it really counted, I didn't let anyone talk over the man who raised me.